Hi, I'm Tamara, and welcome to Tam's Psych Advice. Today, I'm going to talk about a topic that's a little different for me, and it's the psychology of winning when it comes to playing football. I want to put in a disclaimer, sort of and sort of not. I am not the best when it comes to understanding football at all, but I think that gives me an advantage because I see something that other people may not see. And I am coming from the perspective of a counseling and psychology background. So there's a team that I've been specifically watching for the last 3 or 4 years, and I really look forward to it. I feel so excited when I can watch them play because I think that they have many fantastic, phenomenal, gifted, talented players on the team. I think they're capable of winning every single game. But I think there's a psychology involved in when they win and when they lose that really stands out for me. And I'm sure that the NFL has psychologists and counselors and different people like that who are working with their players or have the potential to. But if not, I think that's something that they absolutely 1000% need to delve into even more if they want to win games. And especially if you have a team that has the potential to go to the Super Bowl, but they're not, then you want to look at it from a psychological standpoint. And that's what I'm going to do today, because I think addressing these issues could make for a winning team. You kind of have to look at the whole picture, which if you understand Myers-Briggs personality type, I'm intuitive. So I like looking at the whole picture, not just the details. If you're only looking at winning plays and that's it, and you're not addressing psychological factors or looking at the whole picture or the whole player and just the piece of the player, you're not getting to the root of some issues that could be impeding the players from playing a winning game. And that's just a fact. So the number one thing that people who watch football all the time will say, it's the coaches, it's the players, it's the team. That's what they look at. There's a problem with that coach. They're not coaching well enough. Or the players are just not doing their best. They're not digging in deep, or they're not that great. And that is a factor. That is a factor. So you can have a team that gets along really well and they play to almost their best ability. They may also have a coach that they are really cool with, that they are comfortable with, and together they make the most, and I'm just going to say, loving team. They're very connected, they're friends, they're cool with each other, and it's just awesome. The issue with that is there might be a little piece that's missing that doesn't get them to the next level because they're too comfortable and too safe with each other. So you have to kind of bring in some other element. I definitely think in that case you need to mix it up. And I know they mix it up, but they need to really mix it up. Like I heard one coach say, he makes his players play in all kinds of conditions, the heat, the cold, the ice, the rain, everything. And he doesn't make it just cushy. So you would need that extra little thing that pushes them out of their comfort zone. You have a coach that's too different from the personality types of the players, that can also backfire and be an issue. That's why it's important to understand personality types. Here's something that's interesting. If you have too much friction on the team, that can also create issues. Or you have somebody who's too narcissistic on the team, that could cause issues. But at the same time, there have been times when I have seen competitions where when the people involved disagree, sometimes they move to greater heights. Whereas a team that, hey, we're all getting along and we're all saying the same things, and they don't move as far. So believe it or not, sometimes some level of seeing things differently can kind of force them to iron out some things and also create something better, something more unique, something more special because they're coming from different angles. They're putting different layers on it. That can come from an organizational or business standpoint, from a coach standpoint, or a player standpoint. Number two that you need to look at to have a winning team: adaptability or rigidity. So both of these can be equally good or they can be equally bad. How adaptable is your team? I think being rigid, maybe rigid is too extreme of a term, but basically when you're looking at personality types, you're looking at, hey, I like things settled, I like things done. That's what we call judgers. I like a schedule, I like a routine and a rhythm. Perceivers, when we're talking about personality types, are more flexible, adaptable, go with the flow. They can change midway. They're not stuck with just one way of doing things. So you really have to look at both of those. I think to have a successful team, you got to have both. You got to be able to follow a rhythm, a routine, follow some rules, some regulations. That's super important. But now you've got the groundwork, but when you get out there and you actually play, you have to have adaptability. And I see with some teams, they need a lot more work on being adaptable. I'm starting to feel like football is a little bit like reality shows in some ways, because I think that they do choreograph some of their plays, which is great. I love that. It makes for a more exciting game, and it lends itself to more of that needing things to be settled, having a plan in place. That's awesome. But what happens when that plan falls apart? What happens when you lose a player to injury? What happens when your quarterback is replaced by a different quarterback? What happens if this team is playing totally differently than what you had prepared? What do you do? How adaptable are you? What are your backup plans? And these days, it's like no one has time really for anything. But what is your backup plan? Your B, your C, your D. I think when you're playing on that level, you've got to develop. Somebody's got to come in and develop that B, C, D, E if you are trying to be a judger and play by rules and by a plan. But you got to be able to adapt to changes. And I see with some teams that have the potential to be phenomenal, they don't adapt well. It's like one person doesn't play for a few weeks, and that throws them all the way off until they readjust again. And then that player comes back and it throws them off again for a few more weeks, and then they have to start all over again. I think that has to be addressed. You can't just sweep that under the rug. And I have seen that be a huge problem. So you have to develop adaptability. And that is a mental thing as well. It's hugely mental. How do you shift? It also can take practice. You can practice being adaptable. You don't have to wait until that moment comes. Practice it beforehand. Number three, who are your star players and how do you play them? It's kind of like when Destiny's Child, for example, they had a leader, Beyonce. Why do groups, and then you look at NSYNC, who was the leader? Justin Timberlake did most of it, right? And there's a reason for that. It seems kind of unfair, or like you got all of these great singers. Why aren't you letting them all lead? That creates a problem. So that could be something that is looked at. Some games, maybe you coordinate them where they're all the stars. But then there are some games where maybe you pick out one or two that are going to do most of the work. And maybe that sounds weird, but that's just thinking a little bit differently. And I'll tell you why. This last game that I watched, one of the star players could not play. And so another player who's really good got to show off and shine. He had to play that guy's position, but he played his position. He played another position. He was playing a million different positions. And then 4 guys tried to tackle him. He spun out of it, made a touchdown. So he really shined. And it was interesting because that other star player was out of his way and he could get in there and really do his thing. So sometimes, they say you got too many something in the pot. So basically what I'm saying, instead of always having 6 or 7 guys that are trying to work together to do their thing, maybe move some of those guys out of the way and let one person or 2 people shine. I know it could be argued against, but it's just a thought. Number 4, let's talk about learned helplessness, because I think that's something that needs to be addressed. It's like when you have a star student that everything comes easily to that student. And so then they get to middle school and high school, and all of a sudden, it's not so easy anymore. They are challenged. Some of those students will become D and F students because they didn't practice that muscle. They didn't practice pushing through or having to use their brains and exercise them the way that someone who may not have been the best student, but because they had to work harder at it, they learned those skills. And so when they got to middle school and high school and college, they were able to excel and even maybe surpass the natural A students. So in the NFL, you got a lot of A students. Like, they are the best of the best. And when you are the best of the best, that means you got some natural skills, some natural talent. There are some things that came easily to you that don't necessarily come easily to other people. You also get a lot of accolades, you get a lot of praise. And so what happens when you fall off that pedestal? It depends on the player. It depends on how they were raised, how much integrity they have, how much shame and guilt. So shame and guilt are 2 very, very powerful things, right? So if you feel like you're letting everyone down, you're going to feel a lot of shame. You're going to feel a lot of guilt. And the truth is, you are allowed to make mistakes. You are a fallible human being. And guess what? We still love you. We are forgiving. We're more forgiving than what you think. So shake it off, get back up again, and just understand that we know you're human. You also have to gauge that player. For some people, pressure is an issue. How well do you take pressure? Most people don't handle pressure very well. So you might want to ease up on some players, and some players you have to be a little harder on. Some players are going to be more sensitive. They're going to be more feelers, which is okay. And some are going to be more thinkers and objective about everything. You also want to look at your players and see, do they internalize or do they externalize? So if they internalize, they're going to be mulling things over in their heads. They're going to be thinking too deeply, too hard about things. They're not going to express how they're really feeling, which is a lot of men in our society. We have trained them not to feel, and that's not necessarily a good thing. And then you have some players that express everything. I hate this. I'm not doing this anymore. I suck. They tell you, they externalize and they get it out, and then they're done. And they don't care that everybody hears them. They don't care if they come across silly or goofy or irrational. They say what's on their mind. But then you have more other players who are the A students that internalize, and some of that needs to be dealt with so that it doesn't turn into shame, low performance. Number 5, the key to winning is fight to the end. And they start off winning and they're doing excellent and they're playing well, and then all of a sudden they start to be defeated and the other team starts to polarize them. You can see them slipping away, giving up, throwing in the towel, not having the energy to fight. So you got to practice that skill of, no, we fight to the end. Because I just saw a team that made a touchdown with no seconds. They kicked the ball all the way across the field and made a touchdown. So you got to fight, no matter what. Like, I'm ruthless. You're not going to impact me in that way. I'm going to fight you until the end. Even though we're talking about acknowledging feelings, sometimes you have to suppress those feelings to get the job done. Deal with that later. Get that cockiness back again. I am the best. Get that attitude and go for it, because you are the best. That I don't care what you think of me, and do you. I don't care that I keep missing that touchdown. I'm going to keep at it until I get it. Finally, it's important not to create a new narrative about your team or your playing ability based on 2020, the pandemic. Check out my book, The Workplace Narcissist by Tamara Hunter Zyon on Amazon. I'll see you at the football game. Bye.